Why hello everyone, it's Mystery here, and today I'm here to talk about HAVOC. Specifically, this is a video for those of you who have not yet dipped their toes in HAVOC or perhaps looking for more incentive or encouragement to do so. I encounter tons of players during my streams, Tuesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, who have hundreds of hours and yet have not really played HAVOC at all or even engaged with the system. And I think that's a missed opportunity, especially if you're really getting into the game and you're trying to push yourself to harder difficulties. HAVOC is where it's at, man. Is it perfect? No, not by any stretch of the imagination, but it's definitely going to be a system that Fat Shark is improving on time and time again. We've seen that over the past 6 months, and I imagine that it will become a fully fledged endgame mode that will ultimately become one of the more enjoyable ways to play Darktide. So I'm very glad to have it, and I think you will be a player who enjoys it too if you are a player who seeks out challenge in games. And I do want to kind of preface this by saying that if you are a player who has ever gone like achievement hunting, or after beating like say like Halo 3 or something, your first time on Heroic, you bumped it up to Legendary and gave it a replay. If you are looking for satisfaction in having beat something that was harder than the normal challenge, then this is definitely going to be a good experience for you, because that is what HAVOC is all about, is putting your skills to the test, undertaking what is definitely an unfair challenge and coming out victorious. So if that sounds like it's up your alley, then let's go ahead and start talking about some things you'll want to know before you even get into it. I'm going to be doing a couple of videos in this series talking about HAVOC. This video is for players who are just starting out or maybe just getting back into it after the reset for the first time. I'm going to then make a intermediate video for players who are pushing into the 20s and going into like rank 30, and then I'll finally make a high tier video talking about the little refinements that can be done to reach the absolute pinnacle, that rank 40 that everyone it craves so desperately. So with that being said, there are 5 tips I have for you today. 5 ways to ensure that your HAVOC experience goes as smoothly as possible. The first tip I have for you is to dress to impress. By this, I mean bring your absolute best stuff. Don't hold back thinking, oh, you know, like it's boring to use the dueling sword or whatever. Yeah, it might be, but you never know when party leaders are inspecting you. There are mods out there that allow players, especially PC players, which makes up a vast majority of HAVOC players, have mods that can inspect you from the party finder menu, so they can see what build you're running, they can see what your weapons are, what your blessings are, all that stuff is available to them. And even if they're not running that, they can still see your title. So make certain you have a really elitist title equipped so that people can know that you're good. This is all tips in case you want to get invited to a group, right? However, you can circumvent all of this by simply just hosting your own groups. So I guess this is a 2-in-1 tip here at the front, especially when you're just starting out and you don't have a very high rank. You'll probably want to host your own group, because players are always looking to be carried by someone who is higher than them. So if you're just starting out and you're like 16 or 18 or something like that, people are going to be very loath to invite you, but there's no shame in hosting your own games. And hey, maybe you'll get some really high level people to join in your games. No problem with that. My second tip for you is to understand the HAVOC modifiers, to be well aware of what you're getting yourself into when you're going into any given HAVOC game. Every HAVOC game, all the way from the very lowest rank to the very highest rank, has 2 of these additional modifiers at the bare minimum. And these modifiers can range from something that you almost don't notice to something that is fundamentally game changing, and if you run afoul of it, it can ruin your entire run and perhaps end it. So we're going to go through these modifiers really quickly, and I'm going to highlight the ones that you should be aware of, especially if you're dipping your toes back in for the first time since the update, about a couple months ago when they really redid HAVOC. These new modifiers are much more intense than old ones. First on the list is cranial corruption, and by the way, all of these are listed on Games Lantern, darktide.gameslantern.com/circumstances, and I have this filtered by HAVOC up here. The first one is cranial corruption. Cranial corruption is not currently in the rotation, but what this does is it makes the enemies with this cranial corruption immune to crowd control. So they will not be cowed by the nearby shots or explosions that normally suppress ranged enemies, and they will continue firing on you even when you're doing something like like suppressing them with the chorus ability. They'll continue firing. They can make them very, very dangerous. So be careful around these corrupted, these enemies with the large fungal growth growing out of their head, especially if it's something like big like a Reaper. They can be very, very intense and scary, but otherwise not that huge of a threat. The second one on the list though, Heinous Rituals, is a massive threat. This thing is very, very scary and can be a run ender. Heinous Rituals spawns summoning rituals of 8 conjurers who are pulling a demon host into the map. If you do not stop this demon host, it will spawn, teleport to your team, and start killing. And if you don't kill it, depending on what difficulty you're playing on, it doesn't just stop at one player. By the time you're at HAVOC rank 40, it will kill all 4 players on the team. So you have to get rid of these rituals before they call the demon host in. And this can be very, very tricky because as you draw closer to this ritual, it's going to progress the speed at which it's summoning faster. So when you see one in the distance, the best case is to hold back from getting anywhere near it. Once you see it pop up at the top of the screen, don't panic. You have several minutes before it finishes its summoning, even once it showed up at the top of the screen. And then play in sort of concert with your team. Move in together all at one time using pings, using voice chat. Hopefully you're using voice chat. It's a big thing that helps you win more HAVOCs. But this is a very, very deadly thing, and if you don't get rid of it in an efficient manner, it's going to end your run for sure. So be very careful when Heinous Rituals are on the map. I'm going to skip by these next ones, or Hunting Grounds with Power Supply Interruption. This is not a common affect. This might be on some given maps, but it is not one of the 2 mutators that are present for HAVOC. We also have Mobian 21st. This is not currently in the rotation, but it just spawns in flak armored small enemies. Not something to be worried about. Poxgas and Poxgas with Tox Bombers are additionally map conditions. They are not part of the HAVOC mutator rotation, and these will spawn additionally on top of the 2 mutators you already have. So best practice is when you see a map with Poxgas on it like this, try to play another map. Try to get a friend who's got a different map that you can play so that you don't have to play on these Poxgas maps, because you're going to make the game 50% harder for yourself than it would otherwise be. We then have Pus Hardened Skin. This is one of the more boring effects here. All it does is reduce the range damage taken by pus affected enemies. They'll be glowing bright green, and these bright green enemies are going to take less range damage. So that's it. that's a pretty decent one to get, as well as rampaging enemies. Rampaging enemies are glowing orange. They have sort of an orange outline to them, and these enemies take less damage from all sources. So just be aware when you have rampaging on that enemies are going to be a little bit thicker than normal, but it's not really anything to write home about. You're not going to lose the game because enemies are taking more damage than normal and you just didn't notice. However, you could very easily lose the game to this next one, Blight Spreads. Blight Spreads causes affected enemies who are dripping with green ooze to explode on death, and they'll paint the floor in this blight. And when this blight is on the floor, do not stand in it for any amount of time, and whenever this is on the map, be watching the ground. This thing will corrupt your health very, very quickly if you stand in it, and so it'll just remove your health straight through your shields, etc., etc. It's a great way to lose your wounds and perhaps even lose your life is accidentally walk in a big pile of ooze. This corrupts your health very quickly. I can't stress that enough. So position yourself well and be very careful where you walk when this is on the map. We're going to skip by Emperor's Fading Light here because I'm coming back to this one with a future tip. We now have the Encroaching Garden, our second to last one of these modifiers. Encroaching Garden is the last of the really, really troublesome modifiers. Encroaching Garden makes certain enemies highlighted with this pinkish purplish light, and these pinkish purplish enemies are going to be healing nearby enemies. So if there's 2 gunners next to each other and one is pink and one is not, if you shoot the non-pink one, he'll get hurt, but he will regenerate that health almost instantly. So you have to kill the pink one first. Now you might be thinking, if you haven't played this before, oh no, what if 2 pink enemies get next to each other? But fortunately, the pink enemies cannot heal each other or themselves. So you can just put the damage into those pink enemies, take them out first, and that's how you play around this modifier. Very, very difficult though, especially when there's lots and lots of big metal enemies or horde between you and the pink targets. So be certain that you are using something that can pick those off at range or very, very quickly. And then finally, funnily enough, is the final toll. These enemies will be highlighted in red when final toll is active. What final toll does is when enemies drop below 50% HP, they are going to activate an enraged state where they are going to attack a lot faster, they're going to deal more damage, and they are immune to crowd control. So this can be very, very deadly into things like Ragers or Crushers, who you're normally used to staggering out of their animations. Now they cannot be staggered. So their attacks are going to come out way faster and do more damage, and you need to be very, very careful when you're knocking them low. Fortunately, the staggers that are applied to these enemies before they're knocked below 50% are not erased by the redness activating, so you can stagger them, and then they'll enter into this final toll state, and you can kill them before they can do anything. The most dangerous enemy to be aware of when this final toll activates is usually the captains, because captains can have this activated and then they will be unable to be CC'd by the normal effects, and they can get very, very dangerous, especially the sword captains. My next tip is to stay grouped. Now, staying grouped is obviously important on any game mode of Darktide, but on HAVOC it is of absolutely tantamount importance. You don't want to be separated from your group for any amount of time. A gathered up group is much more effective at dealing with the enemies, and there's plenty of enemies to go around, trust me. So you'll want to make certain that you have everybody tightly by your side, so you're benefiting from all those ultimates, like the bubble, like the shout, like the chorus, that can cover everybody on your team. And this is also going to allow you to very quickly get enemies out of binds like dogs or mutants that have gotten them, and also will keep you aware of, hey, if a boss just spawned in, now we're all right here together, we can start dealing damage together. Never ever stray from the group, especially not to run ahead for anything. Because as we'll address in a later point, running ahead is a surefire way to die in HAVOC. My fourth tip is to beware the Emperor's Fading Light. The Emperor's Fading Light is a modifier that will appear on all HAVOC missions from rank 16 onward. And what the Emperor's Fading Light does is it makes it so that enemies can hurt you through your toughness, first and foremost. This is something that players don't appreciate enough when they're going in. They think that the difficulty is going to be in the overwhelming number of enemies, but really it's in the relationship that you have with your toughness. Now, normally toughness is a barrier, a blue shield that protects our health from damage. And the way it works in a normal game is that when your toughness breaks, you get a 1 second period where you take 90% reduced health damage. This is to prevent you from getting absolutely destroyed. If, say, a machine gunner locks onto you, you have a second to actually react there once he breaks your shields, and maybe use an ability, maybe slide, maybe stop him from shooting, all that stuff. But on HAVOC, that second is now gone. An enemy that shoots you in the shield with a 5-round burst, if the first round in the burst breaks your shield, the next 4 will go directly into your health, and because of increased enemy damages on HAVOC, you will almost nearly die from these small gunners. So since this is so scary, you need to be very aware of ranged enemies, especially. Even the small gunners, like the ones you can see in the picture here, are very, very deadly. Now, the way to deal with them is to either suppress them by using explosives or shouts or chorus or something like that that will stop them from shooting at you, or more importantly, it's to slide everywhere you go. Sliding, sliding, sliding is the name of the game on HAVOC because it stops enemies from being able to shoot you. And you never know when there's an enemy who might be peeping at you from a corner that you didn't see. So always be sliding. You never know when there's going to be an enemy who's lining up a shot that'll blast you to death if you don't have a slide currently going on and you're running from location A to location B. So definitely get used to that difference. It makes you play much more carefully, and you'll have to learn your bullet sliding in order to survive at the higher ranks of HAVOC. And the final tip that I'm going to be providing today, which is to use your resources efficiently. Players oftentimes in HAVOC either use too many resources or not enough at given times of the map, and that can cause them to take otherwise unnecessary deaths. The resources I'm specifically talking about here are health resources and ammunition resources. On HAVOC, ammunition is way more scarce than in normal games. In fact, once you've reached HAVOC rank 40, the ammunition supply is reduced by 60%. So you'll only be getting roughly a little bit less than half of how much ammunition you would get from packs before, and that can mean that many of your guns are going to run dry if you're shooting enemies that you could otherwise be stabbing. So the rule of thumb generally is to if you can, stab enemies that can be stabbed and shoot enemies that can only be shot. Really only use those guns for emergency situations, unless you're a character who's completely reliant on your ranged weapon for dealing any sort of actual damage. But that's only one half of the equation for resource usage. The second is for health resources. Don't be a player who sits on health kits or med stims or anything like that all day waiting for a perfect opportunity to use it, because there's never a better opportunity than right now while you still have live players on your team. If you're missing a good amount of health in your team, drop a health kit. One significant danger that HAVOC poses over regular games is that enemy melee attacks will corrupt your HP. So if players take repeated melee hits, they'll actually lose wounds and they'll be down to their last life if they don't keep their health nice and high. So using those health kits will help keep your will help keep your team's health topped off. And there's no shame in using one a little bit inefficiently. It's better to waste part of a health kit than to have multiple players get downed because they didn't have enough health going into an encounter. Same thing goes for your green syringes. Use those green syringes anytime anyone has a wound and is on their last legs, whether they're a zealot or not. That wound erasing potential of the green stim is absolutely massive on HAVOC because deaths can come in an instant. It is very, very surprising a lot of times when you take deaths in HAVOC. So don't just trust that, like, oh, the player says they're fine, they're totally skilled enough to avoid death. You literally never know. A burster can come out of nowhere and end your life. So against maybe even their proclamations, oh no, I don't need it, shoot them up with that green syringe if they're on their last down and protect their life. They'll thank you later. And that's all the beginner tips I have for you today, guys. Now, in my future videos, we're going to talk about the specific challenges, the things that are really going to become run enders as you advance through the HAVOC ranks, but I think these are great ones to get you started on your journey. And I want to say again that if you're a player who's held off from doing HAVOC for the longest time because you're afraid of the party finder, maybe you've got party finder anxiety, etc., don't be. This is a great time to get into it because there's a ton of players who have just joined thanks to the Arbites update, are just now matriculating into doing HAVOC missions, and are looking for players to play with. Generally, the weekends are a very, very poppin' time for HAVOCs, and of course, you can always join in for playing with me on a stream if you want to catch me streaming sometimes, and I'll play with you. Those are all available to you. I really hope that you guys, especially if you're a player who has fun challenging yourself, I really hope you get into HAVOC and enjoy it, because I think it is a game with a lot of potential for enjoyment in Darktide. And that's the whole video today, guys. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Remember 40K, Warhammer 40K subscribers. All right. Thanks, guys. And peace out. Bye.